Midnight at the Hart estate wasn't peaceful. It was a torture chamber of sound. For 3 months, the future alpha of the Crimson Moon Pack, baby Leo, had screamed every single night. The pack doctors called it colic. The whispers in the hallway called it a curse. But when Tessa, a desperate drifter looking for a paycheck, took the night shift, she didn't just hear a crying baby, she smelled a lie. Everyone was looking at the sobbing infant, but no one was looking at the crib itself. Tessa did. What she found hidden beneath the silk sheets didn't just explain the tears, it implicated the most powerful person in the room. This is the story of how a simple maid uncovered a treasonous plot by looking where no one else dared. Rain lashed against the imposing iron gates of the Hart estate, blurring the world into greys and blacks. Tessa adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, her knuckles white. She wasn't here for glory, and she certainly wasn't here to catch the eye of a shifter king. She was here because the rent in Seattle was 3 months overdue, and this remote estate in the Washington woodlands was paying triple the market rate for a night nanny. The reason for the high pay became audible the moment the heavy oak doors creaked open. A scream, high-pitched, raw and unrelenting, echoed down the marble foyer. It wasn't just a baby crying. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated distress. "You must be the new one," a voice clipped from the shadows. A woman stepped into the light. She was tall, immaculate, dressed in a grey uniform that cost more than Tessa's entire wardrobe. This was Mara, the head housekeeper, and, until recently, the primary caregiver for the Alpha's heir. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it pulled at the corners of her eyes, giving her a permanent expression of surprise and disdain. "I'm Tessa," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the intimidating atmosphere. "I'm here for the 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift." Mara looked her up and down, eyes lingering on Tessa's worn sneakers. "We've gone through 5 nannies in 2 weeks. The Alpha has 0 tolerance for incompetence, and the pup," she paused as another shriek tore through the house, "has 0 tolerance for existence. It seems. Do not expect to sleep." "I didn't come here to sleep," Tessa replied, brushing past her. The house was magnificent, a testament to the wealth of the Hart bloodline, but the energy was toxic. Every servant they passed walked with their head down, shoulders hunched. The scent of stress, acrid and metallic, was so thick it tasted like sucking on a penny. Mara led her up the grand staircase to the 3rd floor. "Rules are simple. You feed him, change him, and walk him. Do not disturb Alpha Gideon unless the house is burning down. He sleeps in the East Wing, but his hearing is sharp. If the baby cries for more than 10 minutes, he will come, and he will fire you." "The baby has been crying since I walked in the door. That's been 5 minutes," Tessa pointed out. "Then you better hurry," Mara sneered, opening the nursery door. The nursery was larger than Tessa's apartment. It was painted a soothing sage green, filled with toys imported from Paris and a crib carved from mahogany. But the luxury meant nothing to the infant thrashing in the center of the mattress. Baby Leo, the heir. He was tiny, his face blotchy and red, his little fists clenching and unclenching. Standing over the crib was Alpha Gideon Hart. Even exhausted, Gideon was terrifying. He stood 6'4", his shoulders broad enough to block out the window light. He wore sweatpants and a t-shirt that was strained across his chest. His dark hair was a mess, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like bruises. He smelled of rain, cedar, and an overwhelming, crushing grief. Since the Luna had passed away in childbirth, Gideon had been a single father, a role that was clearly destroying him. Gideon didn't look up as they entered. He was gripping the railing of the crib, his knuckles white. "Make it stop," he growled. It wasn't a request. It was a plea from a man on the edge of insanity. "Sir, this is the new girl," Mara announced, her voice turning syrupy sweet. "Tessa. I've told her the protocols." Gideon turned. His eyes were amber, the sign of his wolf, and they were burning with frustration. He looked at Tessa with zero hope. "If you can get him to sleep for 3 hours," Gideon said, his voice rough, "I will double your salary. Just fix this." He stormed out, the air pressure in the room lightening instantly upon his exit. Mara smirked. "Good luck, Trash. You'll be gone by morning." She turned on her heel and left, shutting the door with a soft click. Tessa was alone with the screaming air. She didn't rush to pick him up. Instead, she took a deep breath, centering herself. She wasn't a wolf. She was human. But she had raised 4 younger brothers. She knew babies, and she knew that babies didn't scream like this for no reason. "Hey there, little guy," Tessa whispered, approaching the crib. "What's the matter? Is the world too loud?" Leo's screams hitched, then redoubled. Tessa reached down. The moment her hands touched him, she felt the heat radiating off his skin. He wasn't feverish. He was agitated. She lifted him, cradling his head against her shoulder. Usually, the warmth of a body would soothe an infant. Leo stiffened. He arched his back, throwing his head away from her, screaming harder. It was as if being held hurt him. She checked his diaper. Clean. She checked the formula bottle on the warmer. Temperature perfect. She checked his toes for hair tourniquets. Nothing. "Okay," Tessa murmured, pacing the room. "Okay, Leo, I get it. You're mad." She walked him for 2 hours. His cries turned to whimpers, then back to full-blown shrieks. Every time she tried to lay him down in the crib, he would react violently, as if the mattress were made of lava. By 3 a.m., Tessa was exhausted, her arms aching. She sat in the rocking chair, Leo finally dozing off against her chest solely out of exhaustion. The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock. That was when she noticed the smell. It was faint. Underneath the scent of baby powder, expensive lotion, and dirty diapers, there was something else. Sweet. Sickly. Like rotting lilacs. Tessa sniffed the air. It wasn't coming from the baby. It was coming from the corner of the room, near the window where the diaper pail sat. But it wasn't a garbage smell. It was herbal. She stood up slowly, careful not to wake Leo. She walked toward the crib. The smell got stronger. She leaned down, sniffing the mattress. Lavender. Intense, concentrated lavender. Just cleaning supplies, she told herself. Mara probably used heavy detergent. But as she lowered Leo back into the crib, his eyes flew open the second his cheek touched the sheet. The scream that ripped out of him was immediate. Tessa snatched him back up. He settled. She looked at the crib. Then she looked at the baby. "It's not you," she whispered, a chill running down her spine. "It's the bed." The next morning, the kitchen was a flurry of activity. The pack staff prepared breakfast for 20 people, though only Gideon usually ate in the dining hall. Tessa sat at the small staff table in the corner, nursing a black coffee. She hadn't been fired, which was a miracle, but she hadn't succeeded either. Leo had slept only when she held him standing up. "Rough night?" Tessa looked up. A young man with messy brown hair and a kind face was setting down a crate of apples. This was Toby, the pack's omnibator. He did everything from gardening to grocery runs. "Does the king ever sleep?" Tessa asked, rubbing her temples. "Not since the Luna died," Toby said, lowering his voice. "And not since the pup started the night terrors. It's sad, really. Alpha Gideon is a good man, just broken. Mara runs this house now." At the mention of the name, The kitchen went quiet. Mara entered, her heels clicking ominously on the tile. She carried a clipboard and looked fresh, well-rested, and deeply annoyed to see Tessa still sitting there. "You're still here," Mara stated, stopping at their table. "I'm still employed," Tessa countered, taking a sip of coffee. "The baby slept for 4 hours." "In your arms," Mara said sharply, "which is against protocol. The heir needs to learn self-soothing. If you coddle him, he grows up weak. Alpha Gideon needs a warrior, not a mummy's boy." "He's 3 months old, Mara. He needs comfort, not boot camp," Tessa shot back. Mara's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, staff. I've raised 3 generations of hearts. I know what is best. You are here to follow orders. Tonight, he sleeps in the crib. If I check the monitor and you are holding him past midnight, you are out. Do you understand?" Tessa bit her tongue. "Understood." Mara marched away, barking orders at the cook about the Alpha's steak being too rare. "Be careful," Toby whispered, leaning in. "Mara doesn't like it when people challenge her. The last nanny, Sarah. She tried to change the baby's feeding schedule. Mara accused her of stealing silver from the dining room. Sarah was gone within the hour." Tessa frowned. "Why is she so obsessed with the crib? She acted like me holding him was a crime." Toby shrugged. "She's old school, believes in toughening up the wolf blood." Tessa finished her coffee, her mind racing. It wasn't just old school. Last night, when she had smelled that sickly sweet scent, it had felt wrong, and Mara's insistence on the crib felt aggressive. That afternoon, while the household was busy preparing for a visit from a neighboring Alpha, Tessa snuck back up to the nursery. It was her off time, but she couldn't shake the feeling. The room was empty. Leo was with Gideon in his study, the only time the father took the son during the day. Tessa approached the crib. She stripped the sheets. The mattress was a high-end, organic foam brand, Sleep Safe Deluxe. Nothing unusual. She checked the frame. Solid wood. She sniffed the mattress again. The smell was gone. "Strange," she muttered. She remade the bed. As she was smoothing the blanket, she noticed a small, distinct tear in the fabric of the mattress cover, right near where the baby's head would rest. It was tiny, barely the size of a fingernail, but it looked fresh. She reached out to touch it, but the door handle turned. Tessa spun around, grabbing a dirty burp cloth from the floor, pretending she was just tidying up. It was Gideon. He stopped in the doorway, Leo strapped to his chest in a carrier. He looked surprised to see her. "I thought you slept during the day," he said, his voice deep and rumbling. I couldn't sleep," Tessa lied. "Wanted to make sure the room was prepped for tonight." Gideon walked in. He looked at the crib, then at Tessa. For a second, the mask of the Alpha slipped, showing just a tired father. "He slept in your arms last night. I saw the footage." Tessa braced herself to be fired. "He was in pain, sir. I couldn't put him down." Gideon sighed, rubbing his face. "Mara says I'm making him soft by letting you do that. She says he needs to cry it out." "With all due respect, Alpha," Tessa said, stepping forward. "Animals cry it out. Wolves cry it out. Babies cry because they need something. And Leo, he acts like he's in physical pain when he's in that bed." Gideon stared at her. His gaze was intense, weighing her soul. "Pain? The doctors said he's healthy." "Doctors look for sickness," Tessa said. "They don't look for—" She trailed off. She didn't have proof yet. If she accused Mara now, she'd be thrown out like Sarah. "They don't look for discomfort." Gideon unbuckled Leo and handed the sleeping baby to Tessa. The transfer was awkward, his large hands brushing hers. Sparks, literal static electricity, jumped between them. Gideon flinched, pulling back. Keep him quiet tonight, Gideon said, his voice dropping an octave. I have a council meeting in the morning. I cannot function on 2 hours of sleep. I'll try, sir. He lingered for a second, looking at his son, then turned and left. Tessa looked down at the sleeping baby. What is going on in this house, Leo? Night 3 was the breaking point. A storm had rolled in off the coast, thunder shaking the foundations of Greystone Hall. The atmosphere in the house was electric. The wolves were restless. The barometric pressure made them edgy. Leo was screaming. It was 1 a.m. Tessa had been fighting the battle for 4 hours. Mara had come in twice, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching Tessa try to settle the baby in the crib. Leave him, Mara had ordered at midnight. Go to the bathroom. Take a break. Let him learn. Tessa had refused, but Mara had physically ushered her out, locking the nursery door from the outside. 10 minutes, Mara had said. Wait in the hall. Tessa had stood in the hallway, listening to Leo scream. It sounded different tonight. Choked. Panicked. After 10 minutes, Mara unlocked the door. See, he's still alive. Go back in. Mara went off to her own quarters. Tessa rushed in. Leo was purple, gasping for air. She snatched him up from the crib. As she lifted him, his sleeper suit caught on something. Snag. She pulled gently. It was stuck to the sheet. Tessa frowned. She turned on the overhead light, flooding the room with brightness. She looked at the spot where Leo's head had been. The sheet was wet. Not with drool, and not with urine. It was a clear, slightly oily substance that had seeped up from the mattress. And there, poking through the tiny tear she had seen earlier, was something glinting in the light. Tessa placed Leo on the changing table, strapping him in so he was safe. She went back to the crib. She put her hand on the mattress. It was hot. Not warm. Hot. She ripped the sheet off. Underneath, in the center of the mattress foam, something had been inserted. Tessa dug her fingers into the tear, ripping the foam open. She froze. Her heart stopped in her chest. The blood drained from her face. Embedded inside the foam, rigged to a small battery pack that looked like it came from a hearing aid, was a coil of copper wire wrapped around a small, porous pouch. The wire was heating the pouch. The heat was vaporizing the contents of the pouch, releasing a slow, invisible gas directly upward, right into the face of the sleeping baby. Tessa leaned closer, terrified but needing to know. She sniffed the pouch. Wolfsbane. But not just any wolfsbane. This was mixed with silver ash. It was a slow poison. It wouldn't kill a wolf pup immediately, but it would cause agonizing burning sensations in their respiratory system and skin. It mimicked colic. It made them feel like their lungs were on fire, but left no marks. And the heat. The coil was on a timer. It only activated at night. Tessa's hands shook violently. This wasn't bad parenting. This wasn't colic. This was an assassination attempt. Someone was slowly torturing the future Alpha King to death, night after night, right under his father's nose. "Oh my God," Tessa whispered. She reached for the device to rip it out. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." The voice came from the darkness of the corner. Tessa spun around. Mara was standing there. She wasn't wearing her housekeeper uniform. She was wearing a dark cloak, and in her hand she held a heavy brass candlestick. "You really should have just let him cry," Mara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The last girl was smart enough to ignore it. You just had to look closer." Tessa backed up against the crib, shielding Leo's body on the changing table with her own. "You're poisoning him," Tessa accused, her voice trembling. "Why? He's a baby." "He is a monster," Mara spat, taking a step forward. "He is the son of the man who destroyed my family." Gideon Hart thinks he can rule this pack. He can't even protect his own spawn." Mara raised the candlestick. "Scream all you want." Mara smiled, a cruel, twisted thing. "The thunder is too loud. No one will hear you die." Tessa looked at the heavy brass weapon, then at the door, then at the baby. She had zero combat training. She was human. Mara was a wolf, but Tessa was holding the evidence. As Mara lunged, Tessa didn't run for the door. She grabbed the bottle warmer full of boiling water from the shelf and threw it. The water from the bottle warmer hit Mara square in the face. It wasn't enough to kill a werewolf, but the shock of scalding water, splashing against sensitive eyes and nose, was enough to break her focus. Mara shrieked, a sound that shifted midway from human to something feral and guttural. The heavy brass candlestick flew from her hand, clattering harmlessly against the mahogany ribs of the crib before thudding onto the carpet. Tessa didn't wait to see the damage. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded her system. She snatched Leo from the changing table, tucking his small, trembling body against her chest like a football. "You miserable little rat!" Mara roared, wiping the steam from her face. Her skin was already knitting back together, the redness fading as her werewolf healing kicked in. Her eyes had gone fully black, the sign that her wolf was taking the wheel. Tessa scrambled backward, putting the heavy nursing chair between her and the housekeeper. She needed a weapon. A diaper genie? Useless. A pacifier? A joke. Her eyes darted to the window. It was the 3rd floor. Jumping was suicide. "Gideon!" Tessa screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. "Alpha!" Mara lunged over the chair, her fingers elongating into claws. She swiped, the tips tearing through Tessa's uniform shirt, raking across her shoulder. Pain blossomed, hot and stinging, but Tessa didn't drop the baby. She kicked out, her sneaker connecting hard with Mara's knee. It was like kicking a concrete pillar. Mara didn't even flinch. "He won't hear you," Mara hissed, grabbing Tessa by the hair. She yanked hard, forcing Tessa's head back, exposing her throat. "The thunder, remember?" And I locked the soundproofing seals on the door. No one hears the screams in this nursery. That's why the brats crying never woke the staff downstairs. Tessa gasped, clutching Leo tighter as Mara raised her claws for the fatal strike. The realization hit Tessa harder than the blow. The room itself had been weaponized. The isolation wasn't for privacy. It was for concealment. "Why?" Tessa choked out, stalling for time. "Why kill a baby?" "He isn't a baby," Mara snarled, saliva dripping from her fangs. "He is an abomination. His mother was weak. His father is a tyrant. The pack needs a restart. Lord Kyle promised—" She stopped, realizing she had said too much. Her eyes narrowed. "Goodbye, Nanny." The claws descended. Boom! The nursery door didn't just open, it exploded inward. The wood shattered into splinters as a massive force rammed through it. Gideon Hart stood in the wreckage of the doorframe. He wasn't human anymore. He was halfway through the shift, his jaw extended, fur bursting along his arms, his eyes burning with a violet, murderous light that eclipsed the amber of his wolf. The scent of Tessa's blood had reached him, soundproofing or not. Mara froze, her hand inches from Tessa's throat. The color drained from her face, replaced by the grey pallor of death. "Alpha," she whispered, her voice trembling. Gideon didn't speak. He moved faster than Tessa's eyes could track. 1 second he was at the door. The next, his hand was wrapped around Mara's throat. He lifted her off the ground as if she were a rag doll, slamming her against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. "You dared!" Gideon's voice was a distorted growl, vibrating through the floorboards. "You dared touch what is mine." Mara clawed at his arm, struggling for air. But Gideon's grip was iron. He was squeezing the life out of her, his rage blinding him to everything else. "Gideon, stop!" Tessa yelled, stepping forward. Leo was wailing now, the sound piercing the violence. "Don't kill her! She knows who ordered it. She mentioned a name." The red haze in Gideon's eyes flickered. He looked at Tessa, seeing the blood soaking her shoulder, then at the terrified infant in her arms. The sight of his injured son and bleeding employee snapped his rationality back into place. He didn't kill Mara. Instead, he threw her to the floor. "Guard!" he roared, his voice booming through the entire estate. 2 pack warriors, Jackson and Cole, appeared instantly in the doorway, weapons drawn. They took in the scene, the shattered door, the cowering housekeeper, and the nanny holding the air. "Take her to the cells," Gideon ordered, his chest heaving. "Silver chains. If she speaks to anyone but me, I will have your heads." As Jackson dragged a sobbing, broken Mara away, Gideon turned to Tessa. The monster receded, leaving a terrified man. He reached out, his hands shaking, but stopped inches from her. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm fine," Tessa said, though her knees were starting to buckle. She walked over to the crib, the toxic, heated trap, and pointed. Look at what she did." Gideon approached the crib. He saw the torn foam. He saw the wire. He smelled the acrid scent of the heated wolfsbane and silver ash. He went still. Dead still. He reached down and touched the warm spot where his son's head had lain for 3 months. He realized that every time he had forced Leo to cry it out, he had been forcing him to inhale poison. He had been an accomplice to his son's torture. A sound escaped Gideon's throat, a sound of pure, shattered heartbreak. He fell to his knees beside the crib, burying his face in his hands. "I did this," he whispered. "I let this happen." Tessa shifted Leo to one arm and placed a hand on the Alpha's shoulder. It was a breach of protocol, a human touching a king, but she didn't care. "No. You trusted the people who were supposed to help you. Now get up. We have to get this poison out of Leo's system." Gideon looked up. The despair in his eyes hardened into cold, razor-sharp resolve. "Pack doctor. Now," he commanded the empty air. Then he looked at Tessa. "And you are not leaving my sight." The Hart estate went into lockdown. The iron gates were sealed, the perimeter guards doubled, and a communications blackout was initiated. To the outside world, the Alpha was mourning a family anniversary. Inside, a war was brewing. Dr. Aris, an elderly wolf with spectacles and a calm demeanor, finished examining Leo in the Alpha's private suite. This was the safest room in the house, lined with lead and silver-threaded curtains to prevent eavesdropping. "The girl was right," Dr. Oris said, removing his stethoscope. He looked at Gideon with grave eyes. "The toxicology report shows trace amounts of silver ash in his lungs. It causes chronic inflammation, hypersensitivity, and pain akin to burning skin. It's a miracle the boy isn't dead. His Alpha blood is the only thing that kept him fighting it." Gideon stood by the window, staring out at the rain. He hadn't slept in 24 hours. "Is it permanent?" "Reversible," Aris assured him. "With clean air and a specific antidote tea, he will heal in a week. But Gideon, silver ash hasn't been seen in this territory for 50 years. It's a banned substance. Only one family in the High Council had access to the mines where it grows." "The Blackwood family?" Gideon asked, turning. "Note, Blackwood is on the forbidden list, replacing with Vane." "The Vane family?" "Precisely," Aris nodded. "Lord Cale Vane." Tessa sat on the edge of the massive king-sized bed, Leo finally sleeping peacefully in a portable bassinet next to her. Her shoulder was bandaged, the scratches healing slowly. "Mara mentioned him," Tessa said quietly. "Before you came in. She said, 'Lord Kyle promised.'" Gideon's jaw tightened. Kyle Vane was his father's oldest friend, a mentor, a man who sat on the council and preached about tradition and purity. "Kyle is coming here tomorrow," Gideon said, his voice deadly calm, "for the lunar banquet. He's bringing the entire council to check on the heir's progress." It's a setup, Tessa realized. They were poisoning Leo to make him look weak, sick. If the heir is sick, the alpha line is weak. They can vote to remove you. "They want to invoke the law of the fittest," Gideon confirmed. "If I cannot produce a healthy heir, the council can appoint a new alpha. Kyle doesn't want to kill Leo. He wants to use Leo's illness to legally steal my crown." The room fell silent. The betrayal was absolute. "So what do we do?" Tessa asked. "Cancel the banquet?" "If I cancel, I look weak. I look like I'm hiding something," Gideon said. He walked over to Tessa. The height difference was staggering, but for the first time he didn't look down on her. He looked at her. "We play their game," Gideon said. "They expect a dying baby and a broken father. They expect a nanny who is either incompetent or dead. Instead, we are going to show them exactly what they fear." He reached out, his fingers grazing the bandage on her shoulder. "Why did you do it?" he asked softly. "You could have run. You're human. You owe this pack nothing." Tessa looked at Leo, sleeping soundly for the first time in his life. "I don't care about packs or politics, Gideon. I care about a baby who was hurting, and I know what it's like to scream for help and have no one come." Something shifted in Gideon's eyes. The golden wolf surfaced, recognizing a strength that had nothing to do with claws or teeth. "You are under my protection now, Tessa," he vowed. "If Kyle Vane wants to get to my son, he will have to go through me. And if he wants to get to you, he will find out why they call me the Butcher of the North." The door opened, and Jackson entered. "Alpha, Mara is ready to talk. Or she was." Gideon stiffened. "What do you mean?" "She's dead, sir," Jackson said, looking sick. "She bit down on a capsule hidden in her molar. Cyanide mixed with wolfsbane. Suicide." Gideon punched the wall, cracking the stone. "She was our witness." "We don't need a witness," Tessa said, standing up. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold anger. She walked over to the table where the extracted poison device sat in a plastic evidence bag. "We have the gun. Now we just need to catch the man holding the trigger." "How?" Gideon asked. Tessa smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Kyle expects the device to still be there tonight. He expects Leo to scream all night. He expects you to be exhausted tomorrow." "Go on," Gideon urged. "Let's give him exactly what he expects," Tessa said. "We don't tell anyone Mara is dead. We don't tell anyone we found the device. Let Kyle walk into the nursery tomorrow, thinking his plan is working. And when he tries to save the baby, we catch him red-handed." The Great Hall of the Hart Estate was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, a cavernous space usually reserved for joyous celebrations. Tonight, however, it felt like the inside of a trap. The room was draped in velvet and gold for the lunar banquet, illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of 1,000 candles. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of roasted venison, expensive aged wine, and the underlying, potent musk of 50 powerful werewolves. Tessa stood in the deep shadows of the upper balcony, her hands gripping the cold iron railing until her knuckles turned white. She wore a simple, elegant black dress Gideon had provided, something designed to help her blend into the background, to be invisible. From her vantage point, the guests below looked like a sea of predators in formal wear. Every person down there could kill her with a single swipe, and she was about to help provoke the most dangerous one of them all. She adjusted the small earpiece hidden beneath her hair. It was her only lifeline, connecting her to Jackson, the head of security, and to Gideon himself. "They're here!" Jackson's voice crackled in her ear, low and tense. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall groaned open. Silence rippled through the room, starting at the entrance and spreading like a frost, until the only sound was the crackling of the hearth fire. The High Council entered. Leading them was Lord Cale Vane. To the uninitiated, he looked like a benevolent grandfather, a silver-haired statesman with a charismatic smile and eyes like chips of blue ice. He walked with a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, tapping it rhythmically against the stone floor, not out of necessity, but as an affectation of power. He moved with the confidence of a man who already owned the room. Behind him trailed 4 other pack elders, their expressions grim, their eyes scanning the crowd with hawk-like intensity. Gideon met them at the foot of the grand staircase. Tessa's breath hitched as she watched him. He looked impeccable in a tailored tuxedo that emphasized the sheer width of his shoulders, but he had done a masterful job of constructing a mask of defeat. He had applied subtle makeup to darken the skin under his eyes, creating the illusion of deep, sleepless bruising. He held his posture just a fraction lower than usual, slumping slightly, projecting the image of a man whose spirit had finally been broken. "Lord Kyle," Gideon greeted, his voice weary and lacking its usual command. "Welcome to my home." "Gideon, my boy," Kyle said, stepping forward to pull the younger Alpha into an embrace. It looked paternal, but from the balcony, Tessa could see the stiffness in Gideon's back. "You look terrible. Truly terrible." Gideon pulled away, running a hand through his hair. "It has been a difficult few months." "Is the pup still struggling?" Kyle asked, his voice loud enough to carry to the nearby guests. He wasn't whispering. He wanted the pack to hear this. "The doctors are baffled," Gideon lied smoothly, the vibration of his voice reaching Tessa even in the rafters. "He cries all night. He cannot hold down food. I fear he may not have the strength required for the title. I fear he is fading." A murmur of dismay went through the council members, rippling out into the room. This was the admission they had been waiting for, the admission of weakness. "Tragic," Kyle sighed, shaking his head with practiced sorrow. "To lose the mother, and now to watch the son wither. It is too much for one man to bear. Perhaps it is time we discussed the alternative." Gideon looked down at the floor, feigning submission. "The alternative?" "For the good of the pack, of course," Kyle pressed, placing a hand on Gideon's shoulder. "We cannot have a weak lineage. The law of the fittest is clear. If the current line fails, the council must intervene to appoint a strong successor. We must protect the pack's future." "Perhaps," Gideon murmured, sounding defeated. "But tonight is for celebration. Please, drink, eat. We can discuss my failure later." Kyle smiled, a predator realizing the prey has stopped running. "As you wish." The banquet began in earnest. Waiters circulated with trays of wine, and the volume of the room rose as the guests began to eat. But the tension remained, a tight wire strung across the hall. Tessa watched Kyle. He didn't mingle. He stood by the main table, sipping wine, his eyes darting repeatedly toward the ceiling, toward the nursery. Tessa pressed her hand to her ear. "He's checking the time," she whispered. "He knows the device operates on a timer. He wants to make sure it's active before he calls for a public viewing of the sick baby." "Steady!" Gideon's voice came back, barely a breath. He was downed there, surrounded by enemies, playing the role of his life. 10 minutes passed. Then Kyle set his glass down. He leaned over to one of the other elders, whispered something about needing fresh air, and turned away from the crowd. "Target is moving," Jackson's voice barked. "Kyle is excusing himself. He's heading for the east corridor." "He's not going for fresh air," Tessa whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's going to the nursery. He needs to check the dosage. He needs to make sure Leo screams on cue." "I'm on him," Gideon whispered back. "Tessa, go." Tessa didn't hesitate. She abandoned her post on the balcony, slipping through the shadows toward the service door. She kicked off her heels, needing speed and silence, running in her stocking feet. She had to beat a werewolf to the 3rd floor. She sprinted down the narrow servants' hallway, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. While Kyle took the guest route, likely using the main elevator or the grand stairs to avoid suspicion, Tessa took the spiraling service stairs. She took them 2 at a time, her legs burning, adrenaline flooding her system. She burst onto the 3rd floor landing, skidding on the carpet. She dove into the nursery control room, a small supply closet adjacent to the nursery where the baby monitors were housed. She pulled the door shut, leaving it cracked just a millimeter. Seconds later, the service elevator chimed softly down the hall. Kyle stepped out. Up close, stripped of the audience downstairs, he didn't look like a grandfather. He looked like a monster. His face was twisted in a sneer of impatience. He checked left, then right, ensuring the hallway was empty. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and produced a key, a master brass key that only the head housekeeper should have possessed. Mara gave him the key, Tessa thought, a shiver running down her spine. They planned this down to the second. Kyle walked to the nursery door. He didn't knock. He slid the key into the lock, turned it with a satisfying click, and slipped inside. Tessa waited 3 heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. "He's in," she signaled into her mic. "Go, go, go." She burst from the closet, crossing the distance to the nursery door in 3 strides. She slammed the heavy oak door shut and threw the external deadbolt, locking him inside. "What is the meaning of this?" Kyle's voice came from within, muffled by the soundproofing but distinct. The doorknob rattled violently. "Open this door! Do you know who I am?" Tessa leaned her back against the door, her chest heaving. "You're caught, Kyle." There was a moment of stunned silence from the other side. Then, a low, vibrating growl that shook the wood against Tessa's spine. "The nanny!" Kyle snarled. "You meddling little insect!" Suddenly, the wood of the door began to groan. A distinct cracking sound echoed through the hallway. He was shifting. He was going to tear his way out. Tessa scrambled away from the door, backing toward the stairs. "Gideon! He's shifting!" The service stairwell door exploded open. Gideon didn't just run. He launched himself onto the landing. He had abandoned the pretense of the weak, broken alpha. He was a force of nature, his eyes glowing a furious, molten gold. He arrived just as Kale's massive grey wolf arm punched through the center of the nursery door, wood chips flying like shrapnel. A claw the size of a butcher knife slashed blindly at the air where Tessa had been standing seconds before. Gideon didn't bother unlocking the door. He didn't bother with the handle. He planted his foot and kicked. Crack! The entire door frame gave way. The wood splintered and collapsed inward, the force of the blow sending the door, and the half-shifted wolf behind it, crashing to the floor of the nursery. Gideon strode into the room over the debris. Kyle scrambled out from under the broken wood. He shifted back to human form, panting, naked, and furious. He stood up, trying to regain his dignity despite the wreckage. "This is treason!" Kyle shouted, backing up against the crib. "I came to check on the child. I heard a noise. You attack a council elder in your own home?" "Check on the child?" Gideon asked, his voice deceptively low, a rumble of thunder before the strike. He walked over to the crib. Kyle turned to look. The mattress was stripped bare. The heating coil was gone. The poison pouch was gone. The baby was gone. Kyle's eyes widened. He spun around. "Where is it? Looking for this?" Gideon reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, the copper coil and the pouch of wolfsbane sat accusingly. Kyle's face drained of color. "I found it," Gideon said, stepping closer. "And I found the receipt for the silver ash in Mara's room. But the most interesting part, the wire." Gideon tapped the bag. "It's a specific copper alloy used in your mining company's detonators, Kyle. It has your family crest stamped on the battery casing." Kyle's mask dropped completely. The benevolent elder vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered rat. His face twisted into a snarl. "He is a runt!" Kyle screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "He screams like a dying banshee. He is weak. I did what had to be done to save this pack from your incompetence. You are soft, Gideon. You let a human woman dictate your nursery while the pack suffers." "You poisoned a baby," Tessa said, stepping into the room behind Gideon, unable to stay silent. Her voice was steady, cutting through his rant. "You tortured an infant for power." Kyle's eyes snapped to her. Pure, unadulterated hatred burned in his gaze. "And you," he hissed, "the stray, you should have died with the housekeeper." Kyle moved. He was fast, desperate, and armed. He snatched a silver dagger from a sheath hidden in his pile of discarded clothes on the floor. He knew he couldn't beat Gideon in a fair fight, but he could hurt him. He could destroy the thing Gideon was protecting. He lunged, not at the Alpha, but at Tessa. "No!" Gideon roared, reaching out. But Kyle was closer. The silver blade glinted in the light, aiming straight for Tessa's heart. Tessa froze, her human reflexes too slow to dodge a werewolf strike. She saw the madness in Kyle's eyes, saw the tip of the blade inches away. Then, a blur of shadow hit Kyle from the side. It was Jackson. The head of security had followed Gideon up the stairs in full wolf form. He tackled Kyle mid-air, his massive jaws clamping down on Kyle's shoulder. The impact sent them both crashing into the wall. The dagger skittered across the floor, useless. Gideon was on them in a split second. He grabbed Kyle by the neck, ripping him away from Jackson, and slammed him against the large bay window. The glass cracked under the pressure. "You wanted to test my strength?" Gideon growled, his face inches from Kyle's. His alpha aura flooded the room, so powerful that Tessa had to grab the doorframe to stay standing. "You wanted to see if I was fit to rule?" He squeezed. Kyle gasped, clawing futilely at Gideon's iron grip, his legs kicking in the air. "I am Gideon Hart. I am the Alpha King." "And you are nothing." Gideon turned and threw him. He didn't throw him across the room. He threw him through the window. With a deafening crash of shattering glass, Kyle Vane flew backward out into the night air. He fell 3 stories, screaming as he plummeted toward the garden below. Tessa ran to the broken window, looking down. Kyle crashed into the center of the prize rose bushes, right in the middle of the courtyard where the banquet guests had spilled out, drawn by the noise. He lay there, broken, naked and groaning, surrounded by glittering shards of glass and the stunned silence of the entire High Council. Gideon stood by the window, straightening his tuxedo cuffs. He looked down at the traitor, then back at Tessa. "The trial," Gideon said, his voice cold as ice, "starts now." The trial of the High Council traitors wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a public dismantling of the old regime. With the undeniable physical evidence of the heating coil and the damning toxicology reports, there was no room for defense. Kyle Vane, broken and bandaged from his fall into the rose garden, stood before the pack not as an elder, but as a criminal. He tried to speak, to justify his cruelty as a necessity for the purity of the bloodline, but his words were drowned out by the growls of a pack that had finally seen the truth. Gideon sat on the Alpha throne, no longer the exhausted, grieving widower Tessa had met in the rain. He was terrifyingly regal, his judgment swift and absolute. Kyle and his conspirators were stripped of their ranks, their assets seized, and their scents marked. They were exiled to the wastelands, a desolate territory without game or shelter. For a wolf, losing the pack was a fate far worse than death. It was an erasure of identity. 3 weeks later, the silence that fell over the Hart estate was no longer the heavy, suffocating quiet of a tomb. It was the peaceful, rhythmic silence of a home that had finally exhaled. The nursery, once a chamber of shadows and chemical burns, had been completely transformed. The heavy velvet drapes that Mara had used to soundproof the room were gone, replaced by sheer, white linen curtains that danced in the breeze coming off the mountains. The toxic mahogany crib had been dragged out to the courtyard and burned, the flames consuming the remnants of the betrayal. In its place stood a simple, hand-carved bassinet made of untreated pine, which Tessa had selected herself. Leo was a different baby. No longer the red-faced, screaming infant who arched his back in agony. He was now a bundle of soft gurgles and bright eyes. His lungs had cleared the poison, and he was gaining weight rapidly, his cheeks filling out with a healthy, rosy glow. Tessa stood in the guest room down the hall, folding a grey t-shirt. Her duffel bag sat open on the bed, looking just as battered and out of place as it had the night she arrived. She placed the shirt in the bag, her hand lingering on the fabric. She should be relieved. The job was done. The monster was gone. The baby was safe. She had a check in her pocket for a staggering amount of money. Gideon's hazard pay, as he had called it. That would cover her rent in Seattle for 2 years. But her chest felt hollow. It felt like she was carving out a piece of herself and leaving it behind in this stone mansion. She wasn't a wolf. She wasn't an aristocrat. She was just the help. And now that the crisis was over, the hierarchy would naturally reassert itself. Gideon needed a Luna, a powerful female wolf who could stand beside him, bear more heirs, and navigate the complex politics of the shifter world. He didn't need a human drifter who knew how to spot a lie. Leaving. The voice was low, vibrating through the floorboards. Tessa froze, then turned slowly. Gideon was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. He looked different than he had in the courtroom. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a dark sweater, that made him look less like a king and more like the man who had desperately handed her his son that first night. The dark circles under his eyes had vanished, replaced by a clarity and intensity that made it hard to look directly at him. "Job's done," Tessa said, forcing a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. She zipped the side pocket of her bag with a sharp sound. "Leo slept for 10 hours straight last night. The new security team you hired is excellent. You don't need me anymore." Gideon didn't move from the doorway. He crossed his arms, his biceps straining against the wool of his sweater. "The contract said you were hired to care for the heir." "And I did," Tessa replied, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "He's healthy. He's happy. I fulfilled my end of the bargain." "The contract," Gideon said, pushing off the doorframe and taking a slow step into the room, "didn't have an end date." The air in the room shifted. It became charged, heavy with the scent of rain and cedar that always clung to him. Tessa took a step back, bumping into the bedframe. "Gideon, be realistic. I'm human. You know what you are. This isn't how your world works. You need a Luna. You need a wolf to help you lead this pack." "I had a wolf," Gideon said softly, his voice laced with an old pain that was finally beginning to heal. She was perfect on paper. High-born, strong, beautiful. and she died. I had a council of elders who preached tradition, and they betrayed me. I had a head housekeeper who raised me, and she tried to murder my son." He stopped right in front of her. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, a reminder of the power leashed just beneath the surface. "The only person who looked closer," Gideon said, repeating the words that had saved them all, "was you. You didn't care about rank. You didn't care about tradition. You cared about the truth." He reached out, his large, rough hand covering hers where it rested on the handle of the duffel bag. His grip was possessive, yet incredibly gentle. "You saved his life, Tessa. You saved mine. A pack isn't about blood or claws. It's about loyalty. It's about who stands with you when the storm breaks." He looked down at her, his amber eyes searching hers with a vulnerability she had never seen before. "And you are the most loyal person I have ever met." "Gideon." Her voice wavered, the walls she had built around her heart crumbling. "I don't belong here." "Then I don't belong here either," he countered instantly. "Stay," he commanded, but the authority in his voice was wrapped in a plea. "Not as a nanny. I have guards for the nursery. Stay with me. Let's see what happens. Leo loves you. He looks for you every morning." He paused, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "And I think I could get used to you telling me when I'm being an idiot. I need that. I need you." Tessa looked down at her worn-out sneakers, then up at the Alpha King who could have anyone in the world, yet was standing in a guest room begging a human to stay. She thought about her empty, silent apartment in the city. Then she thought about the little boy down the hall who smiled when he saw her face, and the man standing in front of her who looked at her like she was the anchor keeping him from drifting away. She realized she had found her pack, even if she didn't have the teeth for it. Slowly, she let go of the duffel bag. It hit the floor with a soft thud. "I'm expensive," she joked, her voice shaky, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. "My hazard pay just went up." Gideon smiled, a real, breathtaking smile that transformed his face, erasing years of grief. He stepped in, wrapping his powerful arms around her waist and pulling her flush against him. "I'm the Alpha King," he whispered against her hair, inhaling her scent as if it were the only air in the room. "I can afford it." As he lowered his head to kiss her, the sun broke through the clouds outside, flooding the room with golden light. The shadows were gone. The screaming had stopped. And for the first time in a long time, the House of Heart wasn't just a fortress of secrets. It was a home. And there you have it. Tessa didn't just survive. She exposed the treason, saved the Alpha heir, and claimed the heart of the king himself. From a terrified night shift, nanny to the potential future Luna of the Crimson Moon Pack. What a journey. If you enjoyed this story and want more werewolf romances, thrillers, or twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. What did you think of Mara's betrayal? Did you suspect Elder Kale? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.